She believed she was about to marry a disabled millionaire. But the wedding hid a secret. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to today's story. The church bells tolled in the distance, echoing across the morning air, solemn and heavy. Inside a modest bridal suite, a young woman sat frozen in front of the mirror. Her name was Emily. The satin gown that wrapped around her felt more like a costume than a dream come true. Every bead on the dress shimmered under the pale light. But her eyes did not sparkle back. She stared at her reflection as if she were watching someone else's life play out. The veil, delicate and white, brushed against her cheeks as her trembling fingers adjusted it. Her stomach was knotted, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. This was not the wedding she had once imagined as a little girl. There was no love story leading up to this moment. Instead, there was a contract, a piece of paper that bound her to a man she hardly knew. Outside the door, she could hear muffled voices, guests whispering, their words sharp and unforgiving. She is only here for the money. Poor girl, marrying a crippled millionaire. What a pitiful arrangement. Maybe she thinks she will inherit his fortune when he dies. The whispers stabbed at Emily's chest, each syllable a reminder of her predicament. But she stayed still, clutching her small bouquet like a lifeline. She had no choice. Her family's debts had reached a breaking point. The bank was ready to take her mother's house. Her younger brother's medical bills piled higher every month. Without this marriage, they would lose everything. Emily's fiancé, Mr. Alexander Hart, was a man of mystery. The world believed him to be a reclusive millionaire bound to a wheelchair. Photographs in magazines showed him dressed immaculately, but always seated, always distant. Rumors swirled that an accident had left him permanently disabled. Others claimed it was a degenerative disease. To Emily, he was not a husband, but a savior wrapped in secrets. A man whose money could buy her family's survival. The contract was clear. She would live as his wife for 1 year. She would smile in public, keep his secrets, and never dare to question his private life. In return, her family would receive enough money to be free from their chains of poverty and sickness. It was supposed to be a transaction, nothing more. Yet standing there, moments away from walking down the aisle, Emily's chest tightened with dread. The door creaked open, and her best friend Anna stepped in. Anna's eyes widened at the sight of Emily's pale face. "You look like you are about to faint. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Emily forced a smile, though her lips quivered. "Do I really have a choice? If I walk away, my family loses everything. This is not about me, Anna. It never was." "Oh." Anna pressed her lips together, unable to argue. She adjusted Emily's veil and squeezed her hand. "Then hold your head high. Do not let them see your fear." Emily nodded, though her heart screamed otherwise. Moments later, the music began. The doors of the chapel opened. Dozens of faces turned as Emily stepped forward, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. Gasps and murmurs spread like wildfire. Some looked at her with pity, others with scorn. And there, at the altar, sat Alexander Hart. He was dressed in a dark tailored suit, his posture regal despite the wheelchair. His expression was unreadable, his eyes sharp beneath the chandelier's glow. He did not smile, nor did he look away. He watched Emily approach, every step heavy with the weight of judgment and secrets. Emily swallowed hard. She felt the stares burning her skin, the whispers like daggers in the air. With every step closer to Alexander, the walls of her fate closed in. She had agreed to this marriage for survival, but deep down, she knew this was the beginning of something far more dangerous than a contract. Something about the way he held her gaze sent a shiver down her spine. It was as if behind those dark, piercing eyes, he carried a truth she was not yet ready to face. And as the priest cleared his throat and the ceremony began, Emily realized one haunting fact. This wedding was not the end of her problems. It was only the beginning. The chapel was silent except for the solemn voice of the priest and the faint crackle of candle flames. Emily stood at the altar, her hands cold and clammy as she clutched her bouquet. Every word of the vows echoed in her ears like iron chains tightening around her. She repeated them carefully, her voice steady, though her heart trembled. Across from her, Alexander Hart did not waver. His deep voice rolled across the room, calm and deliberate, as though he had rehearsed this 1,000 times. He made no effort to smile. He did not soften his gaze. His presence was commanding, even seated in the wheelchair that many believed defined him. To Emily, his aura was intimidating, almost suffocating, as if he could see right through her fear. When the rings were exchanged, she felt the cool band slip onto her finger, heavier than gold had any right to be. The whispers from the pews buzzed again. Such a shame, marrying for money. She will never last a year. Look at her face. She is terrified. Emily's spine stiffened. She forced her chin upward, pretending not to hear, though each whisper burned like fire on her skin. She remembered Anna's words, "Do not let them see your fear." So she stood taller, hiding the turmoil within her chest. The ceremony ended with polite applause, but the sound was hollow. No cheers, no joy. Only the rustling of expensive clothes and the faint click of shoes against marble. Emily walked beside Alexander down the aisle. She could feel the weight of every stare pressing into her back. Once outside, photographers swarmed. Flashbulbs popped, illuminating her strained smile. Alexander kept his composure, his hand resting lightly on the wheel of his chair. He did not flinch under the cameras, but his jaw tightened, betraying his distaste. In the sleek black car that carried them away, silence stretched between them. Emily clutched her bouquet in her lap, the petals already wilting under her nervous grip. Finally, she broke the silence. "Thank you for helping my family," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. Alexander's eyes flicked toward her, sharp and unreadable. "Do not mistake this for charity. We have an agreement. Nothing more." His words cut like ice. Emily lowered her gaze, her chest aching. She knew this marriage was not about love, but hearing it so coldly spoken still stung. The car rolled through iron gates and into a sprawling estate. The mansion loomed ahead, bathed in golden light, larger than anything Emily had ever imagined. Marble columns stretched skyward, fountains sparkled in the courtyard, and manicured gardens spread in perfect lines. The sight was breathtaking, but to her, it felt less like a home and more like a gilded cage. Inside, maids and butlers lined the entrance hall, bowing respectfully. Their eyes lingered on Emily with polite curiosity, though some flickered with judgment. She could almost hear their unspoken questions. Who is this girl? Why her? A housekeeper guided her upstairs to the bridal suite. The room was lavish, draped in silk and gold, with a balcony overlooking the gardens. But the grandeur only made Emily's chest feel tighter. She touched the satin sheets and thought of her mother's worn quilt back home. She set her bouquet on the table and watched petals scatter onto the polished wood. That night, dinner was served in a vast dining hall. The table stretched farther than her eyes could follow, yet only 2 seats were filled. Emily sat nervously at one end, Alexander at the other, the distance between them like a chasm. Silverware clinked as servants laid out dishes, roasted duck, fine wine, fruits carved into delicate shapes. Emily's stomach growled, but the tension made every bite taste like ash. Alexander finally spoke, his voice calm yet commanding. "This arrangement will remain private. To the world, we are husband and wife. Behind closed doors, we live by the contract. 1 year. You follow the rules, and your family receives what was promised." Emily's fork trembled in her hand. She nodded silently. His gaze lingered on her for a moment before he turned back to his meal. "Do not misunderstand. I do not tolerate disobedience. There are things about me you do not need to know. Keep your distance, and you will be safe." The word safe lodged in her chest. Safe from what? Or from whom? Later, when Emily lay in the vast bed alone, the silence pressed down on her. She thought of her family's smiling faces when she handed them the first envelope of money. She thought of her brother, finally able to see a doctor. For them, she told herself, she could endure this. But as the moonlight spilled across the room, she remembered Alexander's piercing gaze, the way he had spoken of safety like a warning. She shivered, pulling the sheets tighter around her. For the first time, Emily realized the contract was more than just an agreement. It was a step into a world she did not understand, a world filled with secrets lurking in the shadows of that mansion, and she was now bound to it, whether she was ready or not. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the mansion, painting the marble floors in soft gold. Emily stirred in the enormous bed, her eyes adjusting to the grandeur around her. For a fleeting second, she forgot where she was. Then the memory of the contract, the cold ceremony, and Alexander's warning words returned with crushing weight. She pulled the sheets tighter around herself, as though they could shield her from reality. A knock at the door broke her thoughts. A maid entered, bowing politely. "Good morning, Mrs. Hart. Breakfast will be served in 30 minutes. Mr. Hart requests your presence." Emily nodded, her throat dry. Mrs. Hart. The title still felt foreign, like clothes too large for her frame. She dressed quietly, choosing a simple pale dress from the wardrobe that had been filled overnight with garments she had never bought. Each piece screamed wealth, stitched with fabrics finer than anything she had ever touched. Yet wearing them only deepened her sense of being an imposter in a life that was not her own. At the dining hall, the same long table stretched out, but this time Alexander sat closer, midway down the table instead of at the far end. His eyes lifted from a document as she entered. He gave a curt nod, and the servants immediately pulled out her chair. The breakfast spread was lavish eggs, pancakes stacked high with butter, fruit glistening with dew, and a pot of fresh coffee steaming. Emily picked at her plate, appetite lost to nerves. Alexander's voice broke the silence. "How did you sleep?" She looked up, startled. It was the first time he had asked something remotely personal. "The room is beautiful. Thank you," she said softly. He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he returned to his meal. "There are expectations. You will attend social events with me. People will watch. They will question. You must play your role convincingly." Emily's fingers tightened around her fork. "And if I make a mistake?" His eyes met hers, sharp and unflinching. "Then the consequences will be severe. Do not test me." The air thickened with tension. Emily lowered her gaze, her chest pounding. After breakfast, a butler escorted her on a tour of the estate. The mansion was vast, filled with endless hallways, libraries with ceilings so high they vanished into shadows, and galleries lined with portraits of Alexander's ancestors. Every corner whispered wealth, yet the air felt heavy, as though secrets lingered in the walls. In the afternoon, Emily wandered into the gardens. The air smelled of roses and freshly cut grass. For the first time, she felt a moment of peace, the sunlight warming her face. But that peace shattered when she heard hushed voices behind a hedge. Two servants whispered, unaware she was nearby. "Poor girl, she has no idea what she has gotten herself into." Do you think she will last?" None of the others did. Emily's breath caught. She pressed herself against the hedge, her heart racing. The others? What did they mean? Before she could step forward, footsteps approached. The servants scattered, and Alexander appeared, his wheelchair rolling smoothly across the stone path. His sharp eyes found hers instantly. "You should not sneak around," he said calmly, though his voice carried an edge. "I was not sneaking," Emily replied quickly. "I was just walking." He studied her, his gaze unwavering. "This house has rules. It would be wise for you to remember that." Emily nodded, but unease twisted inside her. The whispers of the servants echoed in her head. What had they meant by the others? Were there women before her? Had they too been bound by contracts? That night, Emily lay awake, staring at the ornate ceiling. The bed that once felt too large now felt suffocating. Questions clawed at her mind, but she knew asking Alexander would lead nowhere. His warning was clear: keep your distance, and you will be safe. But safe from what? Or perhaps, safe from whom? In the days that followed, the strangeness of her new life deepened. Each morning was the same: breakfast with Alexander, who rarely spoke more than a few words, followed by long hours wandering the mansion. Sometimes she caught glimpses of him moving with surprising ease, his hands strong as he maneuvered his chair, his eyes sharp as he reviewed documents or spoke to men in dark suits. He was not fragile. He was not weak. The contradiction gnawed at her. Why would a man so powerful need to pretend to be broken? One evening, As the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the gardens, Emily stood at the balcony, staring out at the horizon. The contract had seemed so simple. 1 year of pretending. Yet with every passing day, it became clear that the truth behind Alexander Hart was anything but simple. And somewhere deep inside, she sensed that the secret he was hiding would soon pull her into a storm she was not prepared to face. Days slipped into weeks, and Emily's life inside the mansion fell into a rhythm that felt both orderly and suffocating. Every morning she joined Alexander for breakfast. Every evening they dined across the same long table. Servants drifted in and out silently, like shadows, always watching but never speaking directly to her, unless necessary. It was a routine built on rules and distance. Emily played her role as the dutiful wife in public. At charity galas and business dinners, she stood beside Alexander, smiling politely while the wealthy whispered behind fans and champagne glasses. She could feel their judgment in every glance, the silent calculation of whether she was worthy of standing beside a man of his status. Some pitied her, others sneered openly, but none dared confront Alexander. His presence commanded respect, his eyes silencing even the boldest. At home, however, the silence between them was louder than the whispers of strangers. Alexander remained distant, often locked away in his study with the door firmly closed. Emily wondered what occupied him for hours on end. Sometimes she thought she heard heated voices, men discussing numbers, deals, and threats in low tones. The moment she approached, silence fell, and the door remained shut. One rainy afternoon, Emily found herself wandering into the library, a cavernous room filled with leather-bound books and the faint scent of old paper. She ran her fingers along the spines until she noticed a sketchbook resting on a table. Flipping it open, she expected to find empty pages. Instead, she saw detailed architectural drawings, notes written in Alexander's precise hand. The handwriting was firm, strong, not the scrawl of a man broken by disability. Her pulse quickened. Why would a man who supposedly could not walk fill pages with designs of buildings, gardens, and entire cities? The sound of wheels rolling across the floor made her freeze. Alexander appeared in the doorway, his dark eyes fixed on the book in her hands. "You should not touch what is not yours," he said calmly, though his tone was heavy with warning. Emily closed the book quickly, guilt flooding her cheeks. "I am sorry. I was just curious." His gaze lingered on her for a long moment before he wheeled forward, taking the sketchbook and placing it back on the table. "Curiosity can be dangerous, Emily. Remember that." She lowered her eyes, nodding. But inside, questions screamed louder than ever. That night, she could not sleep. She replayed every detail, the whispers of the servants, the moments she thought she had seen him stand, the strength in his hands, the drawings in his sketchbook. Nothing about Alexander Hart added up. The next day, another gala awaited them. Emily wore a gown of deep blue silk, her hair styled in elegant curls by the house staff. As they entered the ballroom, all eyes turned, and the sea of whispers began again. Poor man still in that chair. She must be counting the days until his will is rewritten. No wonder she married him. Look at his fortune. Emily's jaw tightened. She wanted to scream that they were wrong, that they knew nothing. But she held her smile, her hand resting gently on Alexander's shoulder, as photographers captured the image of a perfect couple. When the music swelled, Alexander guided his wheelchair to the edge of the dance floor. "You should dance," he said. Emily looked at him in surprise. "With whom?" "With whoever asks. That is what they expect." His voice carried no jealousy, only calculation. Reluctantly, she stepped onto the floor. A young businessman quickly approached, bowing slightly before taking her hand. As they moved to the rhythm of the orchestra, Emily caught sight of Alexander watching from the edge, his eyes dark and unreadable. For a fleeting second, she thought she saw something there, not coldness, but a spark of something deeper. When she returned to his side, Alexander leaned closer, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Do not forget, Emily. This is not real. Do not mistake it for anything more." Her chest tightened. She forced a nod, but his words cut sharper than any whisper in the room. Back at the mansion that night, rain lashed against the windows as thunder rolled in the distance. Emily stood by the fire, staring at the flames, when Alexander entered the room. For once, he looked less guarded, his tie loosened, his posture less rigid. "You handled yourself well tonight," he said quietly. Emily turned, surprised by the rare compliment. Thank you, but it is not easy, pretending while everyone judges me. His eyes softened for the briefest moment. You are stronger than you think. The warmth of his words lingered, but so did the contradictions. He praised her strength, yet warned her of danger. He pretended to be broken, yet left clues of hidden power. Emily could not decide whether he was protecting her or trapping her in a web of secrets. As lightning illuminated the mansion, she realized something undeniable. The contract was not just about appearances, it was a mask, and behind Alexander's mask lay a truth powerful enough to shatter everything she thought she knew. The storm that had rolled across the estate lingered well into the morning. Gray clouds hung low, and rain pelted the windows in relentless rhythm. Emily sat by the balcony doors of her room, staring out at the drenched gardens below. Her mind spun with fragments of the past weeks, Alexander's piercing gaze, the sketchbook of architectural drawings, the whispers of the servants about the others. Every thread led to a single knot of mystery that refused to unravel. When the clock chimed noon, a maid entered, carrying a note on a silver tray. Mr. Hart requests your presence in the study, she announced before bowing and leaving. Emily's pulse quickened. She had never been invited into Alexander's private study before. She followed the corridor, her heels echoing against polished floors until she reached the heavy oak door. For a moment, she hesitated, then pushed it open. The study was vast, lined with shelves of books and maps pinned across the walls. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting shadows that danced across the room. Alexander sat behind a massive desk, his wheelchair angled slightly toward the window. He gestured for her to sit. You have questions, he said simply, his voice steady. Emily's breath caught. About what? His lips curved faintly, not into a smile, but into something that acknowledged her unspoken doubts. About me. About why you are here. Her fingers twisted nervously in her lap. I did not mean to pry. I just want to understand. Alexander leaned forward, his gaze sharp. Understand this. The world you entered, the moment you signed that contract, is more dangerous than you realize. Appearances protect us both. If you want your family to remain safe, you will continue to play your role. Safe, that word again. Emily's chest tightened. Safe from whom? She asked carefully. His eyes darkened. From those who would use you against me, from those who want what I have. The fire snapped loudly, filling the silence between them. Emily felt the weight of his words, the hint of something far larger than a simple marriage contract. That evening, Alexander hosted a private dinner for several business associates. Emily sat beside him at the long table, smiling politely as men in expensive suits discussed deals she could barely follow. Their words were heavy with coded language, hints of rivalries and power struggles that made her uneasy. At one point, she excused herself to the terrace for air. The night was cool, the scent of wet earth clinging to the breeze. But before she could take a deep breath, she heard voices near the garden wall. Are you certain she knows nothing? One man muttered. She is just a pawn. He keeps her close because she looks harmless. For now, but if she learns the truth, she will become a liability. Emily's blood ran cold. She pressed herself against the stone pillar, her heart hammering. They were talking about her. Suddenly, a hand touched her shoulder. She gasped and spun around, only to find Alexander behind her. His eyes narrowed as he scanned her face. You should not be out here alone, he said firmly. I just needed some air, she stammered. He studied her, as if he could read the fear etched across her features. Without another word, he guided her back inside. His grip on her arm was steady, but she felt the unspoken warning in every step. Later that night, Emily paced her room, unable to sleep. The words of the men echoed endlessly. A pawn. A liability. She felt trapped in a game she did not understand, a game where her life was a piece on the board. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock. Anna's voice carried through the door. Emily? It is me. Emily rushed to open it, shocked to see her friend standing there. Anna had managed to visit under the pretense of checking on her well-being. The moment the door closed, Anna gripped her hands tightly. You look pale. What is happening here? Anna whispered urgently. Tears pricked Emily's eyes, but she shook her head. I cannot explain. It is complicated. But Anna, I think I am in more danger than I realized." Anna's brows furrowed, but she squeezed Emily's hands. "Then promise me this, do not trust anyone completely, not even him." Emily swallowed hard. She wanted to argue, but she could not. Because deep down, she already knew Anna was right. As the storm finally faded into the night, Emily lay awake in the dark. The mansion felt more like a fortress than ever, and she was its unwilling prisoner. Yet beneath her fear, another truth stirred her heart, was no longer indifferent to Alexander. She despised his secrets, his control, his coldness. And yet, every glance, every unexpected softness in his voice, made her pulse quicken in ways she could not deny. It terrified her more than anything else. The following week began with a tension that Emily could not shake. Every corridor of the mansion seemed to hold eyes she could not see, whispers that stopped the moment she passed. Even the servants behaved differently, their bows stiffer, their gazes more guarded. Alexander remained calm as ever, his composure unbreakable, but the air around him carried a heaviness that unsettled her. One afternoon, Emily decided to walk into town. She longed for air that did not feel filtered through marble walls. Alexander agreed on the condition that she be accompanied by 2 security men in plain clothes. She hated the idea of being watched, but she accepted, eager to escape. The streets of the small town bustled with ordinary life. Children laughed as they chased each other across the square, and vendors called out the price of fresh bread and flowers. For a brief moment, Emmy felt almost normal again. She bought a small loaf of bread from a kind old woman and carried it in her hands as though it were treasure. But normalcy did not last. As she stepped away from the bakery, a car screeched around the corner. Its black windows glinted under the sun as it swerved dangerously close. Emily froze, the bread slipping from her grasp. Before she could move, strong arms shoved her aside. She fell against the cobblestone, scraping her palms, as the car sped past. The security men rushed forward, shouting into radios. Emily's ears rang with panic. She turned, and her breath caught. Alexander was there, not in his wheelchair, not confined by anything. He stood tall, strong, and commanding, his hand still outstretched from where he had pushed her out of harm's way. For a long heartbeat, time seemed to stop. The world knew him as broken, but here he was, standing like the force of nature she had always suspected. Emily's voice trembled. You can walk." Alexander's eyes locked on hers, a storm swirling within them. He clenched his jaw, then barked orders at the security men. "Find out who sent that car, now." His tone left no room for hesitation. As the chaos unfolded, Emily's heart pounded with shock. The mask had slipped, and the truth was undeniable. The man she had married was no crippled millionaire. He was something far more dangerous and far more powerful. Back at the mansion, Alexander's silence was deafening. He paced the study, no longer hiding his stride. His movements were deliberate, controlled, yet filled with tension. Emily sat across from him, still trembling from the near accident. "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Why pretend to be disabled all this time? Why lie to me? To everyone?" He stopped, his back to her. For a moment, the firelight painted him in harsh angles. Finally, he turned, his expression unreadable. "Because the truth makes me a target. The world believes I am broken. That illusion keeps enemies off balance. It keeps people guessing, and it keeps you alive." Emily shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. "So I was just a piece of your disguise? A pawn in your game?" His gaze softened slightly, though his tone remained steady. "No, Emily, you were never just a pawn. You were the only one who agreed to stand beside me without demanding answers, without clawing for power. That is why I chose you." "No." Her chest tightened, torn between anger and something far more dangerous, hope. For the rest of the night, she could not look at him the same way. The man she thought she knew had been shattered and rebuilt into someone she did not recognize. Yet, for the first time, she felt like she was seeing the real Alexander Hart. Lying awake in her room later, Emily could still see the image burned into her mind. Alexander striding into the street, fearless, commanding, alive. It terrified her. It fascinated her. And it left her with a single haunting realization: her life was no longer tied to a contract. It was tied to a man whose secrets could change everything. And now that the truth was revealed, there was no going back. The morning after the attempted attack, the mansion was locked down. Security patrols doubled, and every entrance was guarded. Emily felt the change immediately. The air was heavier, filled with urgency and hidden danger. Servants moved briskly, avoiding eye contact, as though they too feared the storm building within the house. Alexander no longer made any effort to appear confined. He walked the halls with measured strides, issuing orders with quiet authority. The image of him in a wheelchair was gone, and in its place stood the man he had been hiding all along. To Emily, it was both a revelation and a wound. That evening, she confronted him in the drawing room. The fire cast shadows across his face as he poured a glass of brandy. His movements were steady, as if nothing in the world could shake him. "Why keep me in the dark?" Emily asked, her voice trembling but firm. "I deserve to know the truth. Instead, you let me believe I had married a man who was broken. Why would you humiliate me like that?" Alexander set the glass down and turned toward her. His eyes softened, though his jaw remained tight. "I did not humiliate you. I protected you. The fewer people who knew the truth, the safer you were. Do you not see? If they knew how strong I am, how much power I truly hold, then you would become the first target." Emily's chest tightened. "But I was already a target. Those men at the dinner, the car that nearly killed me. Do you think I do not hear the whispers?" "I am not blind, Alexander." For a long moment he said nothing. Then he stepped closer, his voice lower, more raw. "I did not choose you to be a shield. I chose you because I thought you could endure the storm with me. I never expected you to slip past the walls I built, yet you have." Her heart pounded as she met his gaze. There was no longer cold indifference in his eyes. There was vulnerability, the kind that frightened her more than his power ever could. Emily swallowed hard, fighting the swirl of emotions inside her. She wanted to scream at him for the lies, but she also wanted to reach out, to bridge the distance between them. Instead, she whispered, "You cannot protect me by hiding the truth. If we are to survive this, you must trust me." Alexander held her stare for a long moment before nodding once. "Very well. From this point forward, you will know everything. But once you know, there is no return to the world you left behind." Emily's breath caught. She understood the weight of his words. Her life, already bound by a contract, was about to be bound by something far more permanent. In that moment, she realized the truth she had been avoiding. This was no longer about a deal, or even survival. This was about two lives, colliding in a storm of secrets and power. And whether she was ready or not, she was already standing in the eye of it. The following days unfolded with a new intensity. Alexander no longer kept her at arm's length. He spoke to Emily openly, guiding her through the labyrinth of his world. She learned that his fortune was not merely inherited wealth, but power built on sharp strategies, vast networks, and enemies who would stop at nothing to tear him down. For the first time, Emily understood why he had hidden behind the mask of weakness. To appear broken was to be underestimated. It gave him the advantage of invisibility. But now, with the truth revealed, the danger grew closer, and she was no longer on the outside of it. She was standing at his side. One evening, Alexander took her to a boardroom meeting. The long table was filled with men and women of influence, their eyes shifting curiously toward Emily. Alexander introduced her with quiet authority, not as a contract bride, not as an ornament, but as his wife. The weight of that word silenced every whisper. Still, the resistance came swiftly. A silver-haired man across the table leaned forward, his tone sharp. "You expect us to trust her? She is young, untested, and not from our world. How do we know she is not a liability?" Emily felt every eye pierce into her. Her pulse quickened, but she remembered Alexander's words. "Do not let them see your fear." She straightened her shoulders, meeting their gazes one by one. "I may not have been born into this world," she said firmly, "but I know loyalty. I know sacrifice, and I know what it means to fight for family. That is why I am here. Not for money, not for privilege, but because I refuse to run when the storm comes." Oh, the room fell silent. Even the man who had challenged her leaned back, his expression unreadable. Alexander's eyes lingered on her, a rare flicker of pride crossing his face. For the first time, Emily felt she had not only survived the moment, but earned her place. Later that night, as they returned to the mansion, Alexander stopped her in the corridor. His hand brushed hers, tentative yet deliberate. "You spoke with courage," he said quietly. "You proved to them and to me that you belong here." Emily's breath caught, her heart pounding at the warmth in his voice. "I did not do it for them," she whispered. "I did it because if I am to stand beside you, I must be more than a shadow." For a long moment, he held her gaze. The walls between them, once so carefully built, had begun to crumble. But as they stood together in the dimly lit hall, Emily knew the battle was far from over. The truth had been revealed, justice was inching closer, but the storm was not finished. If anything, it was only beginning to roar. The storm finally broke one evening when Alexander gathered his closest allies in the great hall of the mansion. Emily stood at his side, her hands steady, though her heart pounded. This time there were no masks, no disguises. Alexander was no longer the man hidden in a wheelchair. He stood tall before the room, his presence commanding, his authority undeniable. Rumors had already begun to spread outside those walls. The world would soon learn that the so-called crippled millionaire was, in truth, a man who had built his empire through strength and cunning. Tonight was the moment to silence every whisper, to confront the lies, and to declare the truth. One by one, his opponents were named. Corruption, betrayal, and schemes that had threatened to destroy him were laid bare. Documents were revealed, voices raised, and at last, silence fell when no one could deny the evidence. Emily watched the faces of those who had doubted her, those who had pitied her, twist with shock. She felt a quiet satisfaction as Alexander's enemies were exposed for what they truly were. Justice had come, and it came not with vengeance but with undeniable truth. When the gathering ended, Alexander turned to Emily before everyone. His voice was strong, but it carried something it had never carried before: vulnerability. "This began as a contract, a performance, a way to protect myself. But somewhere along the way, the lines blurred. You became more than a shield, more than a name on paper. You became my partner." Gasps rippled through the hall, but Alexander did not falter. He reached into his pocket and drew out a small velvet box. Opening it, he revealed a ring that caught the light like fire. Emily's breath hitched, her eyes stinging with tears. "This time," he said softly, for her ears alone, though everyone could hear, "there is no contract, no deception, no secrets. I ask you not as part of an agreement, but as the man who loves you. Will you marry me again truly this time?" Tears slipped down Emily's cheeks as the weight of his words sank into her heart. The man she had once feared, the man who had hidden behind shadows and lies, was now standing before her with nothing but truth. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, I will." Applause broke out across the hall, echoing against the high ceilings. For the first time, Emily did not feel like a pawn or a stranger. She felt like a woman who had found her place, not because of wealth or status, but because of love that had been forged through fire and storms. As Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger, their eyes locked, and for the first time since the contract had begun, there were no secrets between them. Only love, raw and real, strong enough to withstand the weight of the world. The story that had begun with whispers of pity and scorn ended with a vow of truth. And as they walked out of the hall hand in hand, Emily knew the truth of her journey. She had not married a broken millionaire. She had married a man who had chosen her with his whole heart. And that, she realized, was the only contract that truly mattered.